Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I have here another inks comparison video, and this is my favourite turquoise inks comparison number 1. I think with that, let's go and swap up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the description, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the color of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me when I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over. I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here, and I will rinse the nib off several times, and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. So the first ink I have here that we'll swab up is Visconti, and it is turquoise, and this is actually quite a favourite of mine. I do like this turquoise coloured ink a lot. So we'll do an ink swatch here, and I have to say that this really is a beautiful, beautiful turquoise coloured ink, and it's one that if I want a turquoise coloured ink, I'm pretty much going to go towards this one. So we'll do a second pass over the top half, and that's just going to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Visconti, and it's turquoise. But this for me is actually a really nice coloured turquoise ink. The next ink here is Venvstas, and it's Acqua di Spargi, and this really is becoming more so my favourite turquoise coloured ink, along with Visconti Turquoise there. This is a very nice bottle, shaped bottle. It's a glass bottle, and again, it's just one of these that I'm gravitating towards more in terms of a turquoise coloured ink. So we'll do another ink swatch here, and again, like, this looks very, very similar. I have done writing samples with the two of these inked up in different pens side by side. Does get a little bit more drier, I would say though. We'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or a broad and a dry or a narrow writing nib. So this is Venvstas, and it is Acqua the Spargi. But I do find that that is a very nice turquoise coloured ink, and it's just one again I'm gravitating towards more more recently. It's just one of those inks that I like. The next one here is Lamy Turquoise, and this was a one that I think I bought around about the same time as Visconti Turquoise. I've been in the pen community now for probably 5-6 years, and I have a lot of Visconti colour inks, but not the turquoise. So I decided I would buy the Visconti Turquoise, and I'd also buy the Lamy Turquoise. And I'm pretty sure I bought it around about the same time, if not in the same order. So we'll do an ink swatch here. And you can see already that this looks a bit to be a little bit more, I'd say slightly more darker than the other two. We'll do a second pass over the top half. And again, this is just going to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry versus a narrow writing nib. And this is Lamy. And it is turquoise. But you can probably see there that these three inks, whilst they're wet, look very, very similar. There's not a lot between them. I think you will see a little bit more of a difference when they have dried, though. The next ink is Diamine, and this is Beau Blue. Now, this is a very, very light blue ink, and I don't know, it's definitely sort of towards the turquoisey light blue. So we're doing an ink swatch here. So you can see there, I'd say it's a little bit more of a lighter blue than a turquoise blue perhaps, but I do find that this also is a very dry ink. We'll do a second pass over the top half, and that will just show the difference between a wet or a broad and a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this, move it up a bit, is a Diamine, and it is Beau Blue. But I still have to say that that does to me look more like a turquoise coloured ink. Now the next ink is definitely called turquoise. It's Havasu Turquoise from Diamine. So we'll do an ink swatch. Now I'd definitely say that this is more on the darker side of turquoise. It's definitely a turquoise, but it's not maybe quite as light as the other versions of ink. We'll do a second pass over the top half. Again, just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Diamine. And it is Havasu Turquoise. But as you can see there, it is actually looking a little bit more darker than the other turquoise coloured inks, but I still think it is bordering on a darker turquoise colour. And then the last ink here is Pilot Iroshizuku, and it's Tsuyu-kusa. And we'll do an ink swatch here. And I know some of you are going to say that this isn't a turquoise coloured ink. It is certainly, again, darker still. And I would say that it's probably more between a turquoise and a blue. If we do a second pass over the top half, you'll see the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And then this is Pilot Iroshizuku, and it is Tsuyu, and it's Kusa. So I think let's take a look at these inks now that they have dried a little bit more. So the first ink here is Visconti Turquoise. It's a perfect turquoise ink for me. I'd say it's not too light and it's not too dark. It's a little bit in the middle. And I have to say that I avoided this ink for a number of years because it wasn't easy for me to get in the UK and the bottle price was quite high. I decided more recently in the last year or so to buy this bottle and have to say I am really liking it. Now, can you see the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib? Yes, you definitely can. Is there any shading going on here in the pulled area? There is shading going on there. Certainly around these areas of pulled area, even around here as well. Can you see any sheen? Now, typically turquoise inks, I don't normally find a sheening, but there is a little bit around here, around the edges that you might see a little bit of sheening there. That writing is a little bit more on the darker side, a little bit more on the greener side, I would say. But again, it really depends on the pen, the nib that you put it in. I am liking Visconti Turquoise a lot, though. It is a colour that speaks to me. The next ink here, which I've thought for a long time is almost identical, is Venvstas Acqua di Spargi. Now, I'd have to say it's a little bit more on the greener blue side because you can see the difference here. This is more of a blue. This is a slightly more of a green colour here. Now, can you see the difference between a wet or a dry writing nib? You definitely can. Is there shading going on? There is a little bit of shading going on here in the pulled area, not a huge amount. You do see it more so in the writing sample there, like on the I, the G is a little bit more darker. Is there any sheen going on? I'd say no, there really isn't. But then, like I said, that you typically don't see sheening inks out of turquoise colours. At least I haven't. There might be a few out there that might, but typically I don't usually see it. The next thing I got, the same time I believe as Visconti Turquoise, is Lamy Turquoise. And I really wanted this to be my go-to turquoise ink. I find it on a little bit more, slightly more darker side compared to Visconti Turquoise. You can see here in the wet area, it certainly is more darker there than Visconti Turquoise. It's a nice colour though, irrespective of that. Can you see the difference between a wet or a dry writing nib? You definitely can. Is there shading going on in the pulled area? There is a lot of shading going on here. Is there shading on the writing sample? There is a little bit there, not a huge amount. I'm not seeing any. Is there sheen? There is definitely some sheen, I would say, around the edges here. It really is sheening a little bit more. So you can get sheen on some turquoise coloured inks, but it's not going to be a massive amount of sheen compared to maybe some darker blues, for instance, that sheen red. The next ink here is Diamine Beau Blue, and you could argue, is this a turquoise? Isn't it a turquoise? It's definitely a light blue. I'd say it is bordering on being a turquoise ink. Maybe more so turquoise than some of the other inks, to be honest. Can you see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib? Definitely you can. There's a huge difference there. Is there any shading going on in that pulled area? There is quite a bit of shading. You'll also see it here a little bit more on the writing sample. Is there any sheen? I would say no. I think it's trying to sheen a little bit, but I would say it's not really sheen at that point. It might be if you had it in a converter, in a pen, and you left it inked up for months on end, some of the water evaporates and you might see a bit more sheen, maybe. But I've not tried that myself. The next ink here is Diamine Havasu Turquoise, and I'd say that it still is a turquoise colour ink, but it's more on the darker side compared to these three, and certainly Diamine Beau Blue as well. Can you see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib? You definitely can. Can you see shading? There's definitely shading here in the pulled area. and I'm going to show you up close there so that you can see it. Is there shading in the writing sample? Yes, there is. Is there sheen? Again, there is some sheen around the edges here. Very, very hard to see, but you are seeing a little bit of sheen there. It's not bright red sheen though, so it's, again, turquoise coloured inks typically don't sheen that often. And then the last ink here is Pilot Iroshizuku Tsuyu-kusa. Now, some may argue, is this a turquoise coloured ink? It is on the lighter blue, so I typically think of it as being a turquoise. It's probably more of just a lighter blue or a mid blue. Can you see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib? You definitely can. Can you see shading? There's definitely shading going on here in the pulled area, and I'll show you that there. And you can probably see it in the writing sample a little bit. Is there sheen? Yes, there's definitely a lot of sheen around the edges there. Some beautiful red sheen. So you can get sheen quite easily out of this ink. So if you're looking for a sort of turquoise bordering blue color ink, but you're wanting a little bit of sheen with it, then this might be that ink for you. So that's my favorite turquoise inks comparison #1 video. If there are any of these inks that you like, then let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other turquoise inks that you think I might like, then also do let me know in the comments below. So that's my favourite turquoise inks comparison #1 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.